Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. Over the years, we've done a lot of videos over food storage. I mean, it's a really important topic and it's kind of hard to cover in just one or two videos, but if we were to find ourselves in a disaster, it may not be your lack of food that's your problem. It could be cooking that food. So today we're going to take a closer look at foods that don't require any cooking to be safe to eat. And a lot of times this is a compromise. While none of these foods will make you sick, some of them aren't going to taste that good and may be a little hard to stomach, especially if you have like texture issues like some folks have. And also some of these non-cooked foods don't have as long of a shelf life. Most of your long-term storage foods are shelf stable since they have almost no moisture content. So when you prepare them, at the very least, you're going to need water. But one big exception to this, at least when it comes to having a shorter shelf life, is canned goods. Now, canned goods are what I recommend to most folks when they're trying to figure out what exactly are they going to use for their long-term storage. Maybe they're just getting into preparedness, they want to build their stockpile quickly, and they kind of veer more towards like the freeze-dried stuff. Well, what's the best brand? All that kind of mess. But in all reality, canned goods are going to give you most of what your body needs for a much more reasonable price than those freeze-dried foods, and they might also be easier to prepare in a lot of cases. So, canned meats are really good. They're going to give you a ton of protein. Things like tuna, chicken, ham, roast beef. Spam is technically a canned meat, but it's kind of a canned mystery meat. I know a lot of preppers love it, but probably not the best thing, especially to be eating every day, but every now and again, if you like it, probably no big deal, especially if you're in decent health to begin with. Next up are fruits and vegetables, and these are really nice because they taste pretty darn good out of the can. At least fruits do. Vegetables maybe not as much, but things like peaches, pears, pineapples on the fruit side of things. I really like fruit cocktail. I used to call it fruit cottontail when I was little. My grandma used to feed it to me for lunch like every day. But then for the vegetables, peas and beans, think about things that have pretty good nutrition. There are some things, I think like green beans, that maybe don't have as much nutritional value. They're just something to, put down into your stomach. But things like peas and beans, they have a lot more to offer. Next up, we have canned pasta. And with that, a lot of times you're going to have both meat and noodles in the same container. So you're getting your protein, you're getting your carbs, you're getting a lot of calories, which is a good thing. But the thing with pasta is that it's probably not going to taste as good if it hasn't been heated up. But I mean, even if you can't do a full-on cooking, maybe you just have something like a small alcohol stove or an alcohol stove that you made at home, even if you can't like bring water to a boil or something like that, which some of those things you should be able to do that, even if you are able to heat stuff up, you might make it a little bit more palatable. And the same thing goes for soup and chili. You're going to have a lot of the different foods that you need all in one can. They might just taste a little bit better if you can somehow figure out a way to heat them up. And then there's also other things like Vienna sausages. They aren't too terribly healthy, but occasionally, especially if you're eating them with other things, maybe like barbecue sauce, they can be at least somewhat of a meal. I mean, I know a lot of people eat those, but I just wouldn't count on making that, the main primary part of your diet. And while you'd be in really good shape if you had a big stockpile of canned goods, that may not do you a whole lot of good if you don't pay attention to your security. And one of the easiest ways for people to gather information about you that you probably don't want them to have is just by doing an online search. I've been using Delete Me for over a year now to help keep my online information secure, and I'd like to thank them for sponsoring us today. While most of us do try to keep a low profile, protecting our privacy in OPSEC is a very big challenge because of all the information that's available about us online. All it takes is just a few minutes of online research to figure out where someone lives, who they're married to, how many kids they have, and a lot more. Data brokers store this information and make it available to pretty much anybody willing to pay for it, and it doesn't matter who it is. Criminals and stalkers can use it to harass you, steal your identity, or even do phishing scams on your loved ones, but you do have the right and the ability to protect your information. Delete Me will reach out to those different data broker websites and request to have your information removed. According to my most recent report, they've helped remove my information from nearly 100 locations, and a lot of places they checked were websites I hadn't even heard of, so they're very thorough. If I tried to do all that mess myself, it probably would have taken days of work on my part. And Delete Me also makes sure that your info doesn't pop back up later on, because sometimes those data brokers are sneaky. So I think that they're a very good service to use, and if you want to check them out, then you can use this link and code to get 20% off. Next up, we have what I call our pre-packaged foods, and I wanted to lump all of these sort of in the same category because they do have some things in common. First off, these are going to be ready to eat, just grab and go. You open up the package, you take it out, and you start munching. So even less preparation than even canned goods, but you do compromise quite a bit when it comes to shelf life. A lot of these may only last for around 3 or 6 months before their quality starts to go downhill, but there are some exceptions and we'll talk about that. But one that I didn't really know about until I started researching for this video was chicken salad and tuna kits. So what that is if you have seen the little, tuna pouches and stuff like that you tear open, I think it's basically that plus some crackers. So you can keep them in your backpack, your purse, whatever, use them as a quick snack, lunch, whatever. But they're nice since, they have protein, they have, probably some carbs with them and stuff like that to help give you energy throughout the day. But they also have a slightly longer shelf life than some of these other things at around a year or maybe a year and a couple of months. Then after that is the old prepper staple, which is jerky. Jerky, it makes a very good quick snack. Of course, it gives you a ton of protein, but it's probably only going to last for a few months to a year depending on the variety that you get. Because jerky, especially like the kind that you get in the package at like Walmart, Target, wherever you're shopping, it isn't going to be 100% dry. That's the reason why it's so chewy. It probably also has some other things like barbecue sauces added to it, and that's going to all reduce its shelf life. But as far as a very quick, very high protein snack, it's great. It's probably one of the best out there if you can eat it by the time it expires. Then after that is powdered and canned milk. Now, these are exceptions for a couple reasons. First off, they are going to need at least water to prepare, probably in most cases. And also they're going to have a longer shelf life. Powdered milk can technically last for like maybe around 20 years if you have it in a Mylar bag with an oxygen absorber. And then canned milk is probably going to have a similar lifespan to canned goods in that, it's best by maybe like a year and a half, 2 years. That's the best by date printed on the can. But it's probably safe to consume for a lot longer than that, but it might just have a little bit of a degradation in quality. Maybe the texture, color, stuff like that starts to turn a little bit off. Then after that, we have rice cakes. Now, these are definitely not the most flavorful things in the world, but they do last for 6 months if they haven't been opened yet, and they go well with other things like peanut butter, which we're about to talk about. So rice cakes, put some peanut butter, honey on it, stuff like that, make it taste a lot better, and it'll also kind of help you fill up. But peanut butter, good for 6 to 9 months, depending on the variety that you get. General rule is the more organic it is, the less of a lifespan or less of a shelf life it'll have. But peanut butter's great because it has a lot of stuff in it that your body needs. Has protein, kind of healthier fats, I think, than maybe some other things out there. So it'll give you a lot of energy and it's very filling. There's also a lot of different ways to eat it. I mean, you can just spoon it straight out of the jar. You could stick it on rice cakes like what we just talked about, stick it on crackers, things like that. Eat it with an apple. And I mean, you got a very healthy snack right there. After that, we have granola and protein bars. And With these, I would be careful not to overdo them because many of these, they have higher amounts of sugar, different things like kind of chemicals that maybe your body doesn't need a whole lot of, but they are very good for just quick on-the-go food. Like the other day, I took a Cliff Bar with me when I went out and, did some work somewhere. I work from home and my kid is off for the summer, and productivity doesn't really happen when he's around, so my wife stayed with him at the house. I went off and worked somewhere, and I just ate that Cliff Bar while I was out. It was my lunch. Now, I was a little bit hangry by the time supper rolled around because really it's not a whole lot of food, but I didn't feel like sick or gross, like my body was missing out on stuff that it needed. Then after that, you have crackers. I like Ritz crackers. Those will vary with their shelf life just depending on the different varieties. Some have a higher maybe like fat content than others. Some might have additional things in them, like herbs, spices, stuff like that. And all of that will kind of sort of affect shelf life. But the trick with the foods like crackers and these others that have these relatively short shelf lives is that you basically get how much that you would eat in the given time frame. So if I have crackers that last 6 months, it probably wouldn't be a waste of money to get maybe 5 or 6 months worth of crackers and then just rotate through it the same way that you would any other storage food. You just have to be disciplined enough to stay on top of that. Then after that, we got freeze-dried fruit. And with this, you can get freeze-dried fruit either in like number 10 cans, which would have a pretty long shelf life. I mean, as longer than a lot of the canned goods that we talked about earlier. But a lot of grocery stores like Aldi's, they're selling freeze-dried fruits, in small little individual pouches. And those might be worth looking into, especially if you're just looking for a quick snack. We've picked them up every now and again, and I mean, they don't taste bad at all. Then after that is things like nuts, seeds, and trail mix. And that's one of my favorite things to eat when I'm out like on a multi-day camping trip and things like that, especially if we're being active, if we're hiking. I did that in college. I just got one of those big bags of like the Walmart mountain trail mix. It's the one with, the peanuts, cashews, almonds, also had some M&Ms in it and things like that. And that was my breakfast. We would just be driving to where we were going to hike and, I'd be shoveling that in and I'd be good to go until lunch. And I mean, you can also keep that in little baggies in your backpack if you're going to be hiking. You can keep it in your bug out bag, whatever you need to do. But things like nuts and seeds, they do have a high oil and fat content, so they will expire fairly quickly. So that's something I would recommend eating within maybe 3 to 6 months. Then after that is dry cereals, and you want to be careful with these because things like Lucky Charms and Captain Crunch, they aren't going to be the most healthy long-term options for your food. Kind of like with other things, every once in a while it's probably not going to kill you, but I have been doing some work lately on trying to help my figure because you can't tell because you see me from here down, but below there it looks like I got knocked up by Captain Crunch. So I'm trying to fix that. But with cereals, back to the point, just focus on those healthier ones that kind of, meet what your body needs, what your goals are. Don't get stuff that's just loaded up with a ton of sugar because that's going to bite you in the rear sooner or later. Then after that, we have some other foods. I wasn't quite sure how to categorize these, but things like honey, they have an indefinite shelf life. They're great for long term, but you got to get raw and unfiltered honey. For that, it's probably not going to be something that you eat just by itself. You're probably going to eat it on like rice cakes, crackers, or use it to sweeten other foods. Like maybe you have some tea bags that you're using, or you've cooked up some rice and you want to mix it in as sort of a sweetener that's maybe a little bit better for you than just, white sugar is. Then after that is meal replacement shakes. I have a friend who was in a pretty bad car accident a few years back, and he was not able to chew for a while after that, and a lot of what he ate during that time was things like Ensure and stuff like that he could just drink through a straw that still gave him, most of the nutrients and stuff like that his body needed. That's not something I would overdo by any stretch of the imagination, but in a pinch, those meal replacement shakes, that they can be somewhat valuable. And I think depending on the variety and, what exactly is in it, maybe, 6, 9 months, maybe a year, just depends, figure out which one that you want to try, try a few of them, see what the expiration date is, and then go from there on those. Now, if you want to see some other foods that preppers should be stockpiling, then click here. Or if you want to check out some of my favorite off-grid cooking methods, then click here. Once again, I'd like to thank Delete Me for sponsoring us today. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.